The Trill had hunted humans mercilessly across the stars until they flew right into humanity's trap. Ethan Roberts weaved his battered salvage ship through the Kuiper Belt's cluttered asteroid field. Jagged rock fragments pinged off the hull as he scanned for valuable war wreckage. Ethan sighed, tired eyes flicking over readouts. UEF ships had clashed with Trill raiders here just days ago, and Ethan needed a good haul from the debris. Freelance scavenging was cutthroat, but paid better than his old Navy pilot gig. A shrill beep cut through the dim cockpit. The sensor feed flashed red. Ethan's stomach lurched as a cruel Trill warship knifed out from behind an asteroid. It was Xander. The ruthless alien had a reputation for brutally capturing humans. Sickly green plasma blasts hammered into Ethan's shields. Systems wailed, lights cut out. The stench of fried circuitry filled the air. In seconds, Ethan was a sitting duck. Through the crackling video feed, Xander's compound eyes glittered with malice as the Trill prepared a boarding craft. Humanity was on the brink of defeat in this war. The Trill had pushed the UEF to its last strongholds. If Ethan was captured, he'd be interrogated, then publicly executed like so many others. With shaking hands, Ethan punched in an encrypted UEF distress code. It was a pointless last resort. No human ships patrolled out here anymore. He'd die alone. But then, a titanic human battleship shimmered into existence from behind a nearby moon. The UES Titan. Ethan gaped at it in awe. A secret UEF fleet hidden at the solar system's edge? The Titan's railguns spat streams of red-hot metal at Xander's ship, shredding its hull. The Trill shields flickered and died under the onslaught. Xander's engines flared as he tried to flee. Too late. The Titan's missile barrage gutted the alien ship's reactor core. It erupted in a blinding flash of radiation and vaporized shrapnel. Ethan floated in stunned silence among the drifting Trill wreckage. The UEF had a hidden ace up its sleeve this whole time. He thought of the colonies and shipyards humanity had abandoned, only to secretly regroup for a devastating counterattack. The Trill had underestimated human cunning and resolve. Ethan cracked a fierce grin. The real fight was about to begin, and mankind would show no mercy to the alien scum who had butchered them for so long. The Titan's hangar bay was a hive of activity as Ethan's battered ship was towed in. Scorch marks from Xander's attack scarred the hull. Ethan popped the canopy and clambered out, heart still pounding. Mechanics and pilots swarmed around him, shouting orders. A tall man in a crisp UEF uniform strode up, his face stern. "Ethan Roberts," the man asked. "I'm Admiral Jack Thompson. Welcome aboard the Titan." They shook hands firmly. Ethan had a million questions, but Thompson held up a hand. "I know you're confused," the Admiral said. "Come with me, we need to talk." In a secure briefing room, Thompson explained the shocking truth. The UEF had assembled a secret fleet of 50 advanced warships, hidden at the edge of the solar system. Bristling with cutting-edge weapons and cloaked by stealth tech, they were humanity's last hope. Intelligence reports had revealed the Trill's plans for an all-out invasion of Earth. The secret fleet was the only way to stop them. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, mind reeling. Why all the secrecy? Why not tell people? Thompson's jaw tightened. "Can you imagine the panic? We couldn't risk the Trill finding out. Speaking of which, we could use a skilled recon pilot like you, Roberts. Your knowledge of the outer system would be invaluable. Will you join us?" Ethan thought of all the colonies destroyed, all the lives lost. He nodded grimly. "I'm in, sir. Those Trill bastards need to pay." Light years away, a Trill rescue ship attached grappling cables to Xander's gutted warship. The battered alien commander was brought aboard. His exoskeleton cracked from the UEF attack. Ignoring medics, he staggered to the comms console. "High Command," Xander hissed in the Trill tongue. "The humans, they have a hidden fleet. Dozens of powerful ships. Our invasion plans are compromised." There was stunned silence on the other end. Then the Trill Overlord spoke, voice cold as space. "This changes nothing," the Overlord said. "We attack immediately. All ships converge on the human system. We cannot allow them time to prepare, burn their worlds, and salt the ashes." Trill warships, each one bristling with spikes and glowing with baleful energy, surged out from Alpha Centauri. Over 100 vessels, an armada of nightmares, ripped through the void toward Earth. Their weapons were primed, their warriors hungry for slaughter. Ethan, piloting a sleek UEF stealth ship, spotted the Trill fleet's advance. His blood ran cold. He hit the encrypted comms, voice urgent. "Admiral Thompson, I have eyes on the enemy. They're coming in force, over 100 strong. It looks like they're throwing everything they have at us." Thompson's voice crackled over the link. "Understood. Get back here on the double. I need you leading our interceptor wing for what comes next." Ethan gunned the engines, mind racing with tactics. The Titan and her fleet of 50 UEF battleships, destroyers and carriers, would be outnumbered 2 to 1. Their only chance was to whittle down the Trill before they reached Earth. It would be a battle against impossible odds, but Ethan would make sure the alien scum paid for every human life they'd taken. His squadron would punch through and sabotage the Trill fleet from within. It was a desperate gambit, but it could buy Earth precious time. Ethan's stealth squadron sliced through the void, rapidly closing on the Trill armada's flank. His hands gripped the flight stick as targeting data streamed across his cockpit displays. Just a little closer, and they'd be in range to... "Incoming fire," Maverick's voice crackled over the comms. "They've spotted us." The THS Devastator's sensor arrays had detected the human fighters. Supreme Commander Zorgax rose from his command throne, compound eyes glinting. He barked an order to his crew. "Concentrate all batteries on those gnats. Swat them from my sky." The Devastator's turrets swiveled and erupted with searing plasma. The human ships scattered, afterburners flaring. Ethan jinked and rolled, the nimble craft barely evading the deadly energy blasts. His squadron attacked like a swarm of hornets, peppering the Trill destroyers with precision strikes before darting away. Trill ships exploded under the onslaught, venting atmosphere and bodies. But more swarmed in, a seeming endless horde. Maverick's ship shuddered as a plasma blast clipped its shields. Warning klaxons blared. "I'm hit," Maverick yelled. "Shields critical." "Break off," Ethan ordered. "Get out of there." Too late. A second blast slammed into Maverick's ship, burning through the weakened shields. The cockpit disintegrated in a flash of light and shrapnel. "Maverick," Ethan cried out. His friend, his commander's son, gone. Rage and grief surged through his veins. He wheeled his fighter around, locking onto the Devastator. That's where the alien bastard Zorgax was. Time to cut the head off the snake. Ethan hammered his thrusters, weaving through the firestorm, aiming straight for the Dreadnought's bridge. His onboard AI chimed in. "Hacking module ready," it reported. "Interfacing with Trill systems now." The Devastator's point defense guns fell silent, disabled by Ethan's cyber intrusion. He lined up his shot, fingers tightening on the trigger. One salvo to take out Zorgax and throw the Trill into chaos. He squeezed the... A UF battleship dropped out of warp right in his path, main guns already blazing. The US Titan had arrived with the bulk of the human fleet. Caught off guard, the nearest Trill warships crumpled under the withering barrage. A fierce cheer erupted over the human comms channels. "This is Admiral Thompson. All ships engage the enemy. Drive them back." The space around Earth became a cauldron of fire and torn metal as the fleets clashed. Ethan wove through the battle, still focused on the Devastator. Trill soldiers swarmed its compromised bridge, trying to purge his hacking attempt. He needed to act fast. Ethan steered his ship toward the docking bay, snatching up a pulse rifle. He leaped out as soon as he landed, blasting his way through screeching Trill warriors. Alarms blared, and lights flickered from the cyber attack. He stormed onto the bridge, rifle leveled at Zorgax. The Supreme Commander spun to face him, a crackling energy glaive in his claws. He lunged with blinding speed. Ethan ducked and rolled, firing from the hip. Pulse rounds scorched Zorgax's chitinous armor. The alien pressed his attack, glaive humming as it slashed. Ethan activated his rifle's plasma bayonet and parried, locking blades with Zorgax. They strained against each other, face to face. "Earth will fall human," Zorgax snarled. But not before Mars, your real stronghold, our true target all along. Zorgax shoved Ethan back with inhuman strength, raising his glaive for a killing blow. Ethan fired his rifle's grenade launcher from the hip. The blast caught Zorgax in the chest, hurling him back in a spray of ichor. He hit the deck and lay still, smoking holes in his carapace. Ethan staggered to his feet, Zorgax's final words echoing in his mind. Mars, the millions living there, unaware of the coming invasion. He keyed his comms. Admiral, the Trill, they're heading for Mars. This attack was a feint. For a burst of static, then Thompson's grim voice. Mother of God, Ethan, get back to the Titan. We need... Ethan gunned his fighter's engines, rocketing back towards the UES Titan. His mind raced as he opened a comm channel. Admiral Thompson, the Trill invasion of Earth is a distraction. Their real target is Mars. What? Thompson's voice crackled with shock. Are you certain? Affirmative, sir. We need to move now or millions will die. Thompson barked orders, his voice booming over the fleet-wide channel. This is Admiral Thompson. All ships break off the Earth engagement. Set course for Mars. Maximum thrust. The UEF fleet peeled away, powerful engines flaring as they accelerated towards the red planet. A small force stayed behind to keep the Trill Earth fleet occupied. Ethan's stomach lurched as his fighter dropped out of warp in Mars orbit. A horrific scene unfolded before him. Dozens of cruel Trill warships pounded the planet's domed cities with plasma fire. Swarms of alien fighters strafed the surface, unleashing devastation. The colony's defenses were already in ruins, no match for the sudden onslaught. Ethan spotted the enemy flagship, and his blood ran cold. It was Xander, his would-be captor from before, now a war leader commanding the Trill assault. All wings, engage those hostile ships, Ethan roared over the comms. We need to buy time for the evacuation. He punched his thrusters to full power, angling his fighter towards the nearest Trill squadron. His targeting computer flickered as it locked onto the alien craft. Ethan squeezed the trigger, sending volleys of high-explosive rounds ripping into the enemy formation. Trill ships disintegrated under his fire. On the flagship's bridge, Xander slammed a clawed fist into the arm of his command chair. Redirect all batteries to the human fleet, he snarled. Crush them. The Trill armada reoriented, bringing their fearsome weaponry to bear on the UEF ships. Searing plasma blasts hammered into human shields and hulls. Several UEF vessels crumpled under the barrage, spilling debris and bodies into the void. Admiral Thompson gritted his teeth as the Titan shuddered around him. Evasive pattern Delta 5, he ordered. Keep us in the fight. Ethan rolled and juked, evading the deadly energy beams. His squadron darted among the Trill warships, pummeling them with cannon fire and missiles. Explosions blossomed across the alien hulls. On the planet below, Ethan could see streams of evacuation ships rising from the domed cities, ferrying terrified colonists to safety. He swung his fighter low over the surface, strafing Trill ground forces to cover the refugees' escape. But the Trill numbers seemed endless. For every warship destroyed, 2 more surged forward, weapons blazing. UEF ships fell one by one, overwhelmed by the relentless assault. Ethan's heart pounded as he saw a Trill destroyer lining up a shot on a fleeing evacuation ship. He pushed his thrusters to the limit, afterburners roaring. At the last second, he raked the destroyer's hull with cannon fire, drawing its attention. The destroyer's turret swiveled towards him, glowing with deadly energy. Suddenly Ethan's console lit up with an incoming distress call. He opened the channel, still jinking wildly to evade the destroyer's fire. "This is Shelter 19. A woman's panicked voice filled the cockpit. "We're trapped. The dome is collapsing. Please help us." Ethan's radar showed the shelter, a blinking dot beneath the raging battle. Trill ground forces were closing in, no doubt to butcher the helpless civilians inside. He glanced at the destroyer still dogging him, then at the shelter coordinates. There was no time. "Acknowledged Shelter 19, Ethan said, his voice grim. "I'm on my way. Hang on." He wrenched the flight stick, sending his fighter into a screaming dive towards the planet's surface. The destroyer's blasts sizzled past him, narrowly missing. He leveled out just above the cratered ground, engines howling. Ahead he could see the shelter dome, shuddering under Trill bombardment. Cracks spread across its surface. Ethan gritted his teeth, knowing every second counted. He'd never make it out alive, but he had to try. His targeting computer locked onto the Trill forces surrounding the shelter. Ethan mashed the trigger, unleashing a storm of fire. Alien war machines exploded under the onslaught, shrapnel slicing through their lines. Ethan angled his fighter towards a relatively clear patch of ground, praying it wasn't mined. He slammed the landing gear down, the impact rattling his teeth. Even before the ship fully settled, he was out of the cockpit, pulse rifle in hand. All around him the dome city burned under the Trill assault. Smoke choked the air, lit by the hellish glow of fires. Plasma blasts and explosions thundered in a ceaseless barrage. Ethan sprinted towards the shelter entrance, boots pounding on the rubble-strewn ground. He could hear the cries of the trapped civilians inside, the wails of children. His heart hammered in his chest. He had to reach them, had to save someone. The shelter door was jammed, half crushed by falling debris. Ethan wedged his rifle in the gap and heaved, servos in his armor whining. Slowly, painfully, the door groaned open. Terrified faces stared up at him from the darkness, illuminated by emergency lights. Men, women, children, all huddled together in fear. "Come on," Ethan cried. "Hurry!" He ushered the civilians out, herding them towards his waiting fighter. The ground shook as more plasma blasts rained down nearby. The dome shuddered, supports grinding ominously. Suddenly, a section of the dome ceiling collapsed with a deafening crack. Rubble rained down directly towards the fleeing civilians. Ethan lunged forward, throwing himself over a woman and her child. Jagged chunks of metal and plastic slammed into his armored back, knocking the breath from his lungs. Ethan staggered upright, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. He pushed the woman onwards, urging her to run. More civilians streamed past him, scrambling into the fighter's hold. The whine of Trill engines filled the air. Ethan spun, rifle raised. A squadron of alien fighters swooped towards him, plasma cannons glowing. They'd spotted the evacuation and were moving to slaughter the helpless refugees. Ethan opened fire, aiming for the lead fighter's cockpit. His rounds punched through the canopy and the fighter spiraled away, trailing smoke, but the others kept coming, weapons charging. "Get inside," Ethan shouted to the last few stragglers. He backed towards the fighter, still firing. Plasma blasts stitched the ground around him, superheating the air. Ethan dove into the cockpit, fingers flying over the controls. The engines roared to life, civilians screamed as the fighter lurched up, narrowly evading a barrage of plasma fire. Trill fighters swarmed around them like angry hornets, peppering the ship's shields. Alarms blared as the barriers flickered, weakening under the onslaught. Ethan wrenched the stick, sending the ship into a wild corkscrew. G-forces slammed him back into his seat. "Hold on," he yelled to his terrified passengers. The Trill ships pursued doggedly, cannons hammering. Ethan juked and jinked, pushing the fighter to its limits. A plasma blast seared past the cockpit, close enough to make the glass crackle. Ahead, Ethan saw a UEF corvette plummeting from the battle above, trailing fire and debris. An idea flashed through his mind. A crazy, reckless idea, but it was their only chance. He angled the fighter towards the corvette's tumbling hulk, engines straining. The Trill ships followed, sensing a kill. At the last second, Ethan slammed the control stick forward. The fighter dove, missing the corvette by inches. The pursuing Trill ships weren't so lucky. They plowed into the ravaged hulk, vanishing in a blinding flash of exploding plasma. Ethan hauled back on the stick, pulling the fighter out of its dive. The refugees cried out as the ship groaned under the strain. Slowly, painfully, they clawed for altitude, rising up from the burning hell below. In orbit, the battle still raged between the UEF and Trill fleets, but Ethan focused on dodging the swarming enemy fighters, aiming for the nearest UEF capital ship. Its hangar bay gaped open, a promise of safety. Ethan coaxed his battered fighter through the magnetic containment field. The ship shuddered as he cut the engines, skidding across the hangar deck. It slewed to a stop, sparks fountaining from its abused hull. For a moment, Ethan just sat there, chest heaving. They had made it. Barely. Around him, his passengers sobbed with relief, hugging each other. But there was no time to relax. Beyond the hangar, the battle for Mars still hung in the balance, and Ethan would be damned if he'd let the Trill butcher any more innocents. He popped the cockpit seal, reaching for his rifle. "Stay here," he ordered the refugees as he clambered out, jaw set. "You'll be safe in the ship." Ethan strode across the hangar, boots ringing on the deck. All around him, medics and damage control teams rushed to tend to wounded crew and battered ships. Ethan pushed through the chaos, making for the nearest corridor. He needed to get to the bridge, needed to rejoin the fight. The Trill had to be driven back no matter the cost, for the sake of Mars and every human life in the galaxy. As Ethan stepped into the corridor, the deck shuddered under his feet. Somewhere deep in the ship's bowels, an explosion thundered. The lights flickered. Ethan glanced out a viewing port, and his blood ran cold. A swarm of Trill warships were closing in on the UEF flagship, weapons hammering its weakening shields. And at their head, leading the charge, was Xander's dreadnought, its spinal cannons glowing with deadly energy. Ethan sprinted down the corridor, pulse rifle at the ready. The deck shuddered under his boots as the UEF flagship took another punishing blast from Xander's dreadnought. Crew members rushed past, faces grim and focused. He burst onto the bridge, a scene of controlled chaos. Admiral Thompson stood at the tactical display, barking orders as the UEF fleet battled desperately against the Trill onslaught. "Admiral," Ethan called out, "Xander is targeting our engines. If he takes those out, we're dead in the water." Thompson nodded grimly. "Divert all power to aft shields. Helm, come about to heading 175. We need to keep our nose pointed at that dreadnought." The Titan heaved as it maneuvered, Trill fire hammering its shields. On the view screen, Xander's dreadnought loomed like a monstrous predator, spinal cannons glowing with baleful energy. "Ethan," Thompson said, turning to face him, "I need you out there. Take a squadron of bombers and hit that dreadnought with everything you've got. Target their weapon systems and engines. We'll keep them occupied." Ethan saluted. "Yes, sir." Minutes later, he was in the cockpit of a heavy bomber, a bulky craft bristling with ordnance. His squadron formed up around him, sleek ships laden with enough firepower to level a city. "All right, Hellfire Squadron," Ethan said over the comm. "Our target is the Trill dreadnought. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we don't let up until that bastard is nothing but scrap metal. Understood?" A chorus of affirmatives came back. Ethan took a deep breath, hands tight on the controls. "Hellfire lead engaging." The bombers roared out of the hangar bay, engines flaring blue. Instantly they were in the thick of the battle, plasma fire crisscrossing the void. Ethan jinked and wove, the bomber's heavy armor shrugging off glancing blows. The dreadnought swelled in his sights, a massive, ugly construct of jagged metal and pulsing energy. Its point defenses opened up, filling the space around it with a web of deadly light. "Evasive maneuvers," Ethan barked. The bombers scattered, ducking and weaving through the firestorm. One took a direct hit, vanishing in a silent flash of light. Ethan gritted his teeth, rage and grief surging through him. He lined up a run on the dreadnought's port weapons array, a bristling cluster of plasma cannons. His targeting computer beeped a lock. "Hellfire lead, torpedoes away!" He thumbed the launch button. High-yield warheads streaked from the bomber's ordnance bays, leaving trails of glowing plasma. They slammed into the dreadnought's hull, erupting in blinding flashes. The weapons array vanished in a cloud of shrapnel and venting atmosphere. Xander's ship shuddered under the impact, its port side a ruined mess. But still it kept firing, pouring plasma into the UEF fleet's crumbling defenses. "Their engines," Ethan yelled. "All bombers focus fire on their aft section." The remaining bombers swept in, unleashing a storm of missiles and torpedoes. Explosions marched across the dreadnought's stern, tearing through armor and vital systems. The massive ship lurched, trailing debris and gouts of flame. Suddenly a searing lance of light erupted from the dreadnought's prow. It speared the Titan amidships, burning through shields and hull like they were paper. The UEF flagship staggered, belching fire and wreckage. "Admiral," Ethan cried out. "Do you read me? Admiral Thompson!" Static crackled in his ears. Then Thompson's voice, strained but steady. "We're hit bad, but we're still in the fight. Finish that dreadnought, Ethan. Finish it." Ethan armed his last torpedo, fingers flying over the controls. He accelerated towards Xander's crippled ship, dodging the feeble point defense fire. The bomber shook as it took hits, alarms blaring in the cockpit. He was close enough now to see individual Trill crew scrambling across the dreadnought's ravaged hull. Close enough to see Xander's dreadnought's command bridge. Close enough to end this. Ethan whispered a silent prayer and launched his torpedo. At point-blank range there was no missing. The warhead slammed into the dreadnought's bridge and detonated. A miniature sun bloomed, consuming metal and flesh alike. The dreadnought folded in on itself, torn apart by secondary explosions. It broke in two, spilling corpses and molten debris into the void. Ethan slumped back in his seat, exhaustion and elation warring within him. Xander was dead. The dreadnought was destroyed. But at what cost? He looked out at the battlefield, at the shattered wrecks of UEF and Trill ships drifting in the silent void. How many lives had been lost today? How many more would be lost before this war was over? Ethan didn't know, but he did know one thing. He would fight to his last breath to protect humanity, no matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice. The Trill would learn to fear the indomitable will of mankind. Ethan gunned his damaged engines, steering through the drifting wreckage towards the Titan. The flagship was a smoking ruin, atmosphere venting from gaping holes in its hull. But it was still intact, still fighting, just like the human spirit. As he guided his bomber into the hangar bay, Ethan could hear cheering over the comms. The dreadnought's destruction had reinvigorated the UEF forces, the tide of battle slowly turning in their favor. But Ethan felt no joy, only a grim determination to see this through to the end. For Maverick, for the colonies, for the future of the human race. He would fight on, no matter how long it took, no matter how hard the road ahead. He was a warrior of Earth, a defender of humanity. And he would not rest until the Trill threat was ended, once and for all. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.